I don't like the dogmatic approaches like, okay, we're looking for a college degree, we're looking for X years of experience, and so forth and so on.
Exactly.
What I think you want to start looking for is, what did the person do to get them where they are today?
Guys, I'm super excited to have Zeke Lopez on the show today. So a quick thing about Zeke, he's not only a friend and a coach, but he's the founder of something called People Oxygen, and they are the talent firm for small business owners. So if you're listening, that's probably you. And his work revolves around one belief: your people are the human operating system of your business. So we share that, which is basically the people are what matter. And everything else comes from that. So Zeke is somebody that really, really knows what he's talking about. And my assessment of Zeke that is not official is kind of part like data scientist, part understanding humans, like psychologist. And so just welcome, Zeke. I like to call you my mad scientist that understands people. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. That made me feel very welcome. Mad scientist, data person, psychologist. But yeah, appreciate that, David. Glad to be here.
Well, from my experience, people really, really matter. And I will just say firsthand, I didn't always get that. So I just telling myself, I was the guy that was like, can I find somebody else's job description, copy and paste? I would change the company name. I would do that much. So I found out the hard way that doesn't work. So tell me, if I'm building my company, if I'm building my MSP, why do I need to have a different mindset than that? And what does that mean to make people the human operating system?
Yeah, the human operating system idea kind of sounds really mechanical, right? Where you press this button and this output happens. But when you think about it, everything is mindset, especially for MSPs. So that idea of a mindset is really to come to like one fundamental idea. I call it brains over bucks. Is you have to basically get down to the nitty-gritty idea that has to become a way of life. Otherwise, if you're inconsistent, people are not going to believe you or trust you. Mm. Right? So the brains over bucks idea is really like people and all their messiness. You're hiring a brain that really is quite talented, but yeah, they have warts and bumps. And rather than resist it and fight, the mindset is do two things really well. First of all, before you hire those people, learn as much as you can about the person. Don't be perfect, right? That's the greatest leverage point. Cost the least money, gives you the greatest advantage. If you can't do that and they're already in your business and they've either started to work in a way that you don't like, then you need to find a way to go back to how can I make it easier for them to succeed because I understand how they are and how I am. So that's the mindset, right? Brains over bucks, right? And that's something that if you think about it, how many times do you interact at work? Mm. Thousands, that's not right. Hundreds, not tens, not just Monday, thousands of times. So you can't fake it. You can't do it part-time. There's no faking.
That's right.
There's no masking it. So that's what I mean by mindset. And I think you just start with that as a basic and kind of uncover your own mindset and then work with those elements.
Okay. Yeah. And just as a business owner, right, we've probably all heard you are the product or the average of the 5 folks around you. And the reality for a lot of your hires, either early hires or leadership, they're going to spend more time with you than anybody. So you're inviting these people into your inner circle. So you want to learn, I think, a lot about them. Have you ever wondered if you could recover your backups? Let me ask a better question. Have you ever had a backup fail to recover? Have you ever lost data? Yeah, that's me. Here's what's crazy. 58% of recoveries fail to recover. So if you think it's just you couldn't be more wrong. What are we going to do about that? Well, you've got 2 options. Enter Servosity. What we do and what we exist to do is test your backups and manage them for you. We test every volume, every single day. We do weekly testing, monthly testing, and quarterly testing. And you can hand off the drudgery and babysitting of backups and the day-to-day management to our team that monitors your backups for you. It's time to level up your backup game. One way you can do that is visit servasi.com/learn more if you'd like to take the process that I've spent the last 18 years building and steal it and apply it to your MSP so that you can level up your backup game. Check out the link below in the description or visit servasi.com/learn more. So let's say I'm listening and I go, yes, I struggle to find people. Yes, I've put up a job description that somebody gave me as a template. I've hired somebody, they didn't work out. And it just feels like this. Maybe it's just me saying this. It just feels like that you can invest a ton of time and still not know what you're doing, still not know who you're getting. So where do we start? You mentioned start with something like what's a practical example of how I could take one step in the right direction?
Well, like we said earlier, at least, my experience is we always start the same, and it's the mindset. And so what we do with the mindset is we start with, we call kind of the origin mindset, you as an original, the owner, right? Because everything springs eternal from the owner as long as they're running the business. And so we go through just basically one or two steps to try to find what is your mindset related to people and people problems. Right? It's like you said, hey, a job description, copy and paste. Well, I get it, right? You're busy, you have things that you're working on. But in my mind, that goes back to the mindset, brains over bucks. It's like, if really this hire is going to be that important to me. So for step one, once you get the mindset, step two for a small business is what I call the core three. You're going to need 3 people that really will determine your next level of success. 1 is who's heading up sales. 2 is who just managing the money, because you always want to know what you have and what you don't have from an accounting and finance point of view. And number 3, who's going to deliver on your promise? That's the operational side. So if you look at those 3 as the foundation, so the first thing is get those 3 really solid. If you don't, what's going to happen is typically my clients, they're one of the 3 or all of the 3, right? And so you're not going to go too far just because you have so much energy, and because, quite honestly, it gets frustrating to do all 3 jobs, because most likely you're really good at one and not the other 2. Yeah. So that's step 1, right? Step 2, mindset, and then the core 3. Once you get that working, then you want to just have a process for working with people that's simple, right? So you can do in small steps, because I very rarely come across someone who's going to stop everything and say, hey, we're going to focus on this. You have to do what we're talking about in addition to your normal work between 8 and 7, whatever your time frame is.
Right.
So design the plan to be simple, and I mean that. Just accomplish specific steps, and when you achieve it, and I also call this the boring step. This is the non-sexy step, right? It's like, what? I have to develop some ways of doing this. It's the boring step because, again, most business owners, going back to the origin mindset, right? We can see it. It shows up like, I got excited to start the business because I believe the way people serviced and acknowledged technology was all wrong.
Right.
Or I believe that the company, so you can see step 3 is the boring step, as I refer to it, because no one's going to see it.
Yeah.
It's hidden. I don't know if you come across this a lot, but my experience is no one truly knows all the hard work a business founder and owner puts in to get to where they are today.
Yeah.
They see where they are today and they say, oh, they're driving a nice car, they take multiple vacations, they have a nice house, they have, money to spend. But if you talk to them and get to know them, that's why the origin story is so important. You find out like, what? You had to sell a house when you couldn't make payroll or sell something you owned? Yes. You put their salary before your own?
Yeah.
Yes. You would tolerate someone who stole money from you and then find a way to get them out of the business, but you couldn't throw them out right away? Yes. Like one of my MSP clients is in the, let's call it central north part of California, so I won't divulge their name or location. He had one employee that really knew cloud computing really well and cloud storage. The owner himself was really focused on selling and getting new clients. And what began to happen is that employee figured it out and he held my client hostage. Like more money, creating his own work hours, just wouldn't share information so we could train someone else.
Wow.
So that's a classic example of the boring work. You mean I have to tolerate this guy? And I said, yeah, until we find a replacement and you feel confident, right? We can't throw the business out with this guy. So that's why I call it the boring, the hidden part that people don't see.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it starts with the founder. It starts with their origin story.
Absolutely.
It starts with what they find valuable. And that should pour into all the way at the beginning, even the job description, what you're looking for, why you're looking for it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, well, yes. I mean, first of all, if you use somebody else's job description, you're probably going to miss the mark and hire a brain you didn't want.
That's right.
Really.
Yeah.
Right. So
I've done that.
But but I get it. It's if you don't have that right mindset, you're just not going to do it. Right. So that's the challenge.
Yeah. Well, in my experience, I'm busy, and especially being a technical founder, I think all I need is to list those things that they need to do. So there was a Reddit thread in MSP subreddit, and it was just, I'm looking for this. I don't know if it was service delivery manager or something like that. And where are some good templates? Where can I find this? And, he got good answers in terms of here's where you can find this template and that template, and the RMM and the PSA, they provide, some of those have templates for each. Just out of curiosity, I downloaded one, and it's like, here's all the 42 common roles an MSP might have on the way to scale, and here's all their job descriptions. And maybe that gives you some food for thought around responsibility or what they might manage. But I think just kind of come back to the first part. When you're growing, you're busy, and you need another head, and you need to go make a hire. And even if you think, okay, I care about people, I want the right people, I want the right brains. I just can say personally, I've made that mistake of saying, I guess what others do works. Just get another job description and copy it and put it out there. So I guess let's get into the deeper part. Why does doing the same thing that everybody else does not produce any different result? If I just copy, and why can I not do that?
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to expose some of my ideas here, but I like the movie The Matrix, right? And Morpheus turns to the hero in the movie and says, you got the old red and blue pill, but there was something else he said in the movie that really struck out in my mind that told the story. It's one thing to know the path. It's another thing to walk the path. And that's where the hardship is. Like I've not yet met a business owner who's not a smart person.
Right.
I've not yet met a business owner who didn't know what to do. Like when I say, hey, you've got to put more, like they knew that. I'm not telling them anything they didn't know. What they didn't know how to do is walk that path being themselves. Right. And so this really applies to the whole industry of information selling and coaching and training. It's like super easy for me to say, here's the path, and give you the map, give you the job description template, give you the compensation template. That's abundant and wide. The reason why they don't work is there's no such thing as an average person. They don't exist. It's a fallacy. Right. And much of the advice that are being given to other people is really based on what someone read in a book, best practice, and people that are well-intentioned. Don't get me wrong. They're well-intentioned. But how many times do you go to a website and look up a company and say, here's all our failings for last year.
Right.
Here's what didn't go well for us. You don't see it, right?
That's right.
So it's the old, know the path, walk the path. And we've been talking about walking the path. That's what holds people back. And it's pretty much 90% of the time, it's emotional. It's not a logical knowing something or having the skill. It's just actually investing emotionally and making sure that's the way it should work. Right. So that's at least my belief why there's that disconnect, and why, everybody says this cliche of, oh, the people are the most valuable asset. Well, yeah, but it's a cliche. It's like, okay, how do I do that? Where do I start? And so if you own a business, isn't that really what you own, is a set of ideas that your heart's really behind, right? Who else would start a business? You know, you were probably told it's unpopular, it wouldn't work. You doubted yourself. No one was taking the path. So who does that?
Right.
Who decides to overcome all of that? Well, someone who just feels like they don't have any other choice.
That's right.
That's the power of learning to walk the path, because over time, what happens, everything changes, right? You're not the company of 5 people. Now you're at 10. Your clients keep evolving. The market changes. So that's, how do I keep evolving with that, but not lose who I am? Right? That's the question, because think about compensation issues. Like someone said, I need $180,000, otherwise I can't work here. Like you think about, really? When I started this, I was lucky to just meet my basic bills. So
yeah.
Anyway, so going back to the original question, it's really about the reason why people know the path, i.e. high acquire templates, get information. They don't walk it. It's because it's hard to do. And they themselves don't know, how am I going to feel when I'm on the path?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they need help in figuring out. And then devising a system that works with them, not for someone else, right?
Yeah. A lot to unpack there. So you got to walk the path. You got to, if you really truly believe that people are the differentiator, then you probably shouldn't do the same thing everybody else does. And most of the MSPs I talk to now have realized that they felt like sales and marketing was their top constraint. And now they're telling me it's talent. I can't find enough talent, or I can't keep the talent, or I can't get enough talent in certain areas, or all of those. So, what is the next step I should take, and say, how do I start to really walk the walk and make talent the priority, instead of, something I do only after I've realized we're out of capacity and it's time to hire, and I go do my normal post a job, run some interviews, get to the final 3, pick one.
Yeah, I mean, great question. So I'll just tell you a real story. So a few years back, one of my clients approached me. He was in what I call the self-made solopreneur stage. He had 5 employees. He was number 6, and he was doing very well. Like he was in a high stakes engineering type business that totally relies on people, but he had maxed himself out. And he was also starting to ask myself, if I want to get out of this business, I can't sell it to anybody. Who's going to want to buy it, right? And plus, he has ADHD, so which has its own unique ways of thinking, right? So the first thing we did is, when I met him, he had already had challenges around hiring and firing people. He basically thought most people are stupid, right? Because they couldn't see how quickly he saw things and didn't have his background. So the first thing we did is I talked to him about, okay, I have to prove to you that this can work, right? So the first thing I did was, this might seem a little odd, I asked to meet with his wife.
That sounds interesting.
Unconventional, right? It's not, right? And so and what you'll find out with unconventional people, who knows them the best? So I cut through all the snuff. I said, "Will you allow me to do that?" He goes, "Yeah, sure." And so she helped him do many things, like stand in between him and the 5 to 6 people. She said, "Well, he really doesn't like working with these types of people." So I got good information, and it was believable because it came from his wife, right? So wherever I can to get that believable information for you, not for me. It's for you, right? So we said, okay, the first thing we need to do is we need to hire your first of the core 3. He was the primary salesperson. He managed all the projects once he sold them. He delivered operations, and his wife did the books. That was kind of the design. So in his case, the first person we hired was someone to manage the day-to-day.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay. So then the operations bucket. or operations. Yeah.
Yep. So we did that just because without creating that free time, he couldn't even begin to think about anything
Mm-hmm.
else. Okay. And what I found out, which I didn't know, I made a mistake back then, was this. We went through 3 general
Oh,
managers,
wow.
operations managers. Here's what I found out. He didn't want to pay any money to any one person unless they could pay for themselves.
Mm.
So that means that operations manager, guess what? He had to learn to sell too.
Mm.
So what happened, we went through 3 that were good managers, but not good at selling and managing.
Right.
Well, that's a pretty rarefied group, right?
Yeah.
To do both. We bumped into one, and when we found that person, the business grew from 5 million, then it went to 13, then it went to 20, and now we're at a plateau of 30. And that took a period of 3 to 4 years.
Wow.
During that time, we built the core 3. We found, we promoted the sales operational manager to a general manager role, but with a focus on sales. We went out and found an operations manager. And then on the accounting side, we went through and found a person who really understood finance and accounting. But here's what we did. We changed the whole interviewing process. So the way we did that was I asked them, do I have your permission to, when we find that short list of people we want to work with, to tell them how you really are and what you think?
Mm. I love that.
And he said, yeah, go ahead. And so we actually let people know up front, this is what the owner believes. These are the quirks. This is where they're headed as a group. This is why they're headed as a group. Is that something that you can stand up for?
Mm.
And when we did that, turned out like we created, as a byproduct, a performance culture.
Mm-hmm.
He totally, I won't mention numbers, but let's just say his GM makes probably in the top 1% of people. And that's because we blended the people side with then also taking everything we learned about the owner and started to share it with the marketing side.
Oh, wow.
Because it's one and the same.
Yeah.
That identity spills out into the people you hire and the message you deliver to the market. So that's how we did it.
Interesting. So there's a lot there to unpack, but you helped understand the owner, how they were getting in their own way. You had to figure out how to free up their time, which that speaks to me of having to get out of my own way, first of all. Second of all, having to free up their time. But ultimately you changed the interview process to, once you got to a short list, really expose what's going on, right? Probably a little bit uncomfortable compared to the normal, right? The normal one is like, here's our company, go look at our stuff on the website or some mission statement.
Oh, I think it's much worse than that. My experience is when you're trying to recruit someone new,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, what are you looking for? That's trying to get that, we clean that up,
Mm-hmm.
right? No more of the general job description template stuff, right? So we cleaned that up. The second piece was just put yourselves in the shoes of a candidate for a second, right? And let's say, true story, you're hiring a very successful person to become your day-to-day operations manager, going to manage the operations, which now consists of, 20, 30 people, right? What's the typical approach? You never tell them about anybody who came before them that's failed.
Right.
You only highlights the great aspects of the job. But what's the greatest fear that the manager has? Not about themselves. They trust their ability. It's about, am I going to fit in here?
Right.
Right. So we changed that process. So now that we changed the interview process, we also changed and asked them a focus in the interview process. We said, hey, like I just told you, like, what's your greatest concerns that keeps you from really feeling you could play wholehearted in a company?
Mm.
It's what I said. It's like, I know myself. I know my skills. I trust them. I know how to do it well. I just don't know the people. I don't know the owner very well.
Mm-hmm.
So we changed that exchange. So it wasn't so much, everything's beautiful. It goes back to what I said earlier, right? It always comes back to know the path, walk the path.
Mm.
We were now helping candidates walk the path because we weren't afraid of what we're trying to do. We weren't afraid of our quirks and our weaknesses and being different. It became our champion for advantage. So can you see how it's spilling out in all to these little actions as we go along the way?
Yeah. So you took the part where normally as a company, there's nothing you open up. You don't open up the kimono at all, right? You're just boilerplate. And I'm making this up, but like one of the things that I think if you want to transform yourself, you have to get naked. And what I mean by that is you have to show people the truth, the vulnerability, the things you don't want. And so, in a certain way, it sounds like, you came in and said, here's our issues, here's the turnover, here's the challenges, here's the people you'll work with. And they're real people. They're not theoretical, perfect people that only bring perfect things with them when they come. And I love that, right? Because I just, if I were the candidate, I would feel far more either attracted or repelled, which is probably a win.
Right, for them, because they're a person. You want them to be successful. I mean, there's nothing like, I've been in living rooms of many an entrepreneur, and I've seen them write $500,000 bonus checks, taxes paid, to their whole leadership team, each one. And if that sounds like a foreign idea to your audience, I'm here to tell you, I think it's realistic. I've experienced it. And it's because, remember, going back to what we said, it's the people, once you get to a certain size, that have to drive the success because you can only do so much yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So when you can share the benefits, see their kids go to college, see them take vacations, get new cars, buy a home, to me, that's a very personal level, real, concrete achievement, right?
Absolutely.
And so it sounds hard to do. And I'm not saying everybody has to do that. I'm just saying, like, to me, that's what makes small business ownership so great.
Right.
It's when it's organic. You can see the people and their lives being impacted. And I'm not against big business, but I think it loses some of its value. You become more machine-like, right? You have 1,000 people, like, you might not even know the names of 10% of the people because there's no time, there's no energy spent. Yeah.
And that's where I think, of recent, there's layoffs and, but they're dressed up in words like reduction in force of, only 8%. But, if that's 1,000, that's still 80 people. And when you're in a small business, you don't call it that. You call it, I screwed up. And I'm, and the people that you have to go to if you ever are in that situation. And you're probably sacrificing your salary and your own self to make sure that doesn't happen. So there's a real relationship there. The funny thing is, in my experience, most MSPs I've worked with, they have that heart. They will go to bat for their team. They are super loyal, sometimes to a fault. But yet we all sit here in the interview process and act like every other company, big or small, instead of saying, I am looking for somebody to join me and spend, a decade building this out. And here's why. And here's what here's more specifics of what I'm looking for. I'm not just looking for yet another, service delivery person or manager or whatever the role is. I'm looking for somebody to help us grow. And like I was saying earlier, that's part of you're going to spend so much time with them. They're part of your inner circle, whether you realize that yet or not.
Yeah, I think that's we talked about this a little earlier. That's the hidden item, isn't it? Because of the mindset,
Right.
I know you understand that and you believe that and you act with it, but it can be certainly elusive,
Absolutely.
It's hard but I think that's why I call it an advantage. It's because it is hard to do, right? And so it's not for everybody. I want to be upfront with people. It's hard to do, but if you want it to become your advantage, right? And part of that origin mindset that we talked about is just understanding, like, what does an advantage really mean for you, right? Does it mean more margins? Does it mean less competition? Does it mean less heavy-handed selling because people see that as an advantage, right? So there really is a tremendous impact there. But like I said, it's you know, the always the same tension. It's the brain over the box. It's like you wrestle with it.
Yeah. I find it interesting though, because I feel like um, a lot of the things around hiring are when you're small business, you may not know what all the hires look like. So you go and you pattern after others and they give you an org chart and you feel like you've got to hire just the way the org chart looks. And then you get job descriptions. There's all these things from the org chart to the job descriptions, to the roles, to the responsibilities, to all these things that are boilerplate. And especially if you're growing and you're a smaller company, you might think that's the only way to do it, because others, they built a 50-person org and you're a 5-person org, and you're like, well, what did your org chart look like at this stage, or who were you hiring next? But on the other end of the spectrum, most of the owners, when I know they want their employees to come to them and talk to them openly. I have an issue with this, whether it's how we're handling tickets to what's going on in my personal life. Most of them, they're not trying to pry, but they want to know the actual people. But I find it interesting now that we talk through that, the hiring process doesn't reflect that, right? The hiring process is generally not opening up, not being vulnerable. Not only on the candidate side, but I'm talking about as the employee.
We're putting on masks is what we're doing.
That's well said.
I put on my mask as a candidate. You put on your mask as the hiring authority, and then we hope that that's going to work. But now what you're describing, hope doesn't offend your audience. I call it the BS in the dogma of understanding how to hire people, especially the unconventional ones, right? It's the dogma is there's just one way to do it, and you just described it, right? But when you think about it, is if you want to stand out, you want to create an advantage. Well, you really can't do what everybody else is doing. If you want to identify candidates that stand out or are different, you can't really do what everybody else is doing.
That's right.
Right. So here comes the dogmatic side. Part of the HR world is that's the way they've been trained, right? And so I don't want to hold I think their hearts are right, but I want to hold them to account for that, just because that's the way they teach them in school.
Sure.
That's the way they see on podcasts and webinars. And the same for the small business owner, right? I mean, some of my clients never went to college. Some of them, they never intended to manage people and be people managers. They just loved what they knew how to do better, right? So really, and then if you're trying to sell to that audience, right, whether it's HR or business owners, what do? You create a product that can scale, that can reach the masses. Well, I'm saying don't do that, right? Unless your goal is to be, even when you're bigger, you don't have to do that, but there's so much pressure when you're bigger to do it. It goes back to the brains over bucks idea again. But as someone who's going to have, 20 to 50 people pushing up to 100 people, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't fall for the seduction of the dogma, right? And don't treat the people like they don't know what they're doing. Really, they don't know any better.
Right.
How they haven't experimented, they haven't tried, failed, or succeeded, because they too are believing the story. I have to put my mask on. I make no mistakes. I'm perfect. I'm efficient with my time. And, I'm never going to let you down. Well, I've yet to meet someone like that.
Yeah.
And if I did, I would probably imagine it would be at a great cost to them personally and the people around them, right? So really what we're back to is learning how to work with a mess.
Yeah.
That's really, and being totally real and accepting, but always trying to make it better, knowing that there's an advantage there. And that advantage will translate into bucks because you had brains and you valued the brains.
Yeah, well,
sorry, a little passionate there about that.
No, I love it. I love it. Well, I mean, the reality that we may not phrase it this way, but if we're hiring, we have a problem that we need somebody to come in and take ownership of. And that's the truth. I mean, we dress it up in a fancy title in this, but like there's something that either I can't do, don't have enough time to do, or whatever the situation is, I'm not skilled enough to do, and I have a problem and I need you to join me and we're not going to grow. And it's not when you're a solo entrepreneur of the one, it's literally you. But when you get 3, 4, 5 or more, it's not just you. It's everybody. The whole company will not level up because you can't install that next one of those core 3 or what that next person is. And I love what you said. Like, it just struck me that we have a mask on. You have your mask, and I've got my mask, and maybe that works great for a party, especially a costume party. And if that's all you're going to do and interact with somebody short term, fine. But that at a party, if you see somebody once, okay, whatever. They saw you once. But if you're going to spend this many hours with somebody day in and day out, and they're going to build such an important part and interact with so many of your team, of your clients, whatever that is, that's not going to work. It made me connect to, I had somebody that said that the hiring process that we use, they're like, it's so thorough. They're like, I feel like it's more like, I mean, they're like, it's more like dating or something. Like, you're really getting to know people before you hire. And they were like a little alarmed and also impressed, I think, but just a little bit like, wow. And I think there's just something to, like, there is an analogy there of like, we all show up to a party dressed in our best, making our best impression with a mask on. And maybe that's okay if that's your only interaction. But if you're going to really work with people, and then you're going to have to build a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, that's great the way you said it. I love that. It's, but there's a fundamental truth that underlies everything that we talk about. And at the end of the day, if you run a business, the people will always be there.
Yeah.
So do you want people that you want to work with, or don't you? So we're not going to get away, or we can't avoid this idea and escape it, because I get it. It's hard, right? But at the end of the day, you require people, as you said, right, to not only join the team, but to help you retain energy as an owner, right? To help you have confidence, to help you, like those nights when you're saying, I've heard this too. It's like, you know what, Zeke, it might be easier for me to shrink back to this size, and I won't make as much money, but man, it'll be a lot easier.
Yes.
And again, no argument against that. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong, but I will say it goes back to that origin mindset. Is that really what you wanted? And typically it's when the owner, business owner, finds himself or herself in that tough spot where, man, this is hard, right? Like the person said to you, oh, that's like dating someone. I don't, I hope dating's fun. I haven't dated in a long time, but it's certainly going to be revealing.
Yeah.
And so why hide from it? Why try to avoid it? So
exactly.
Anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. And I love that, you have to be more vulnerable. I think it's a lot like a personal relationship. If you're vulnerable, you will get to know people more than when you always have your mask on. And I think even in the hiring process that translates. And something that struck me, just you said, Zeke, was the owner just thought, maybe I want to shrink back. And in my experience personally, you're going to hit a pain line as an owner. You're going to hit a few, but like you won't grow past the pain line. Because at a certain point, if you haven't hired some of these core roles and delegated and have trustworthy people that own it, you're just not going to grow anymore, right? You won't keep growing through that because it's too painful. You're working too many hours. It's too stressful. You feel like you haven't gotten the right people to take ownership. And just speaking to somebody that's made most of these mistakes, even when I thought people are the strategic asset, you still get to the point where you're like, why am I carrying half the balls when there's, 10 other people? Or why can they not see this? Because I haven't, made that vision clear and I haven't set responsibility. Why can I not find this right person? Because I didn't put enough effort into it. Because there's all these things. I've talked to a lot of owners that have made this mistake and then they lose people left and right. They have really high turnover. And then the folks they hire, they feel like they don't get it. They can't ramp up. And, I think some of that has to do with hiring the wrong people. And some of that certainly has to do with giving them no process, no onboarding, no, there's no, you're giving them a straight cliff with no anchor points. And while you somehow ascended that, most people can't. So I just love how, you got to get this right. You got to, and I think there's a hard part of going, I get it. People are valuable. And I would say everybody listening probably agrees with that, because when you find them, you're just like, this is
Sure.
amazing. But where I struggle, maybe where if you're listening, you struggle, like, how do I go from believing it? How do I go from like, I found a person, but like where I struggle for a long time is I found somebody, not because of great process, not because I had figured it all out, just it was a blessing. So how do I turn that into something more replicable? And I don't mean, I'm not talking about scale. I just mean, how do I intentionally find somebody that is the good fit instead of doing all the normal things, hiring for average people with an average process and ending up with an average or worse outcome? So what are your thoughts? How do I start to think about what I need to change in myself and in my
Yeah, let's
company?
start with just like, how do I hire a, a, a person that's going to be additive to me and to the company? Let's just start with that. So a really good part is, like, you referenced it. You said kind of the job description,
Mm-hmm.
which is really what I call the straw man's version of a perfect person. All these attributes they have to have,
Yeah.
right? And let's make it super simple, right? And let's make it so simple that it puts the odds in our favor,
Mm-hmm.
right? So typically, so I don't like the dogmatic approaches like, okay, we're looking for a college degree, we're looking for X years of experience, and so forth and so on.
Exactly.
What I think you want to start looking for is, what did the person do to get them where they are today?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that sounds simple, and it is, but it could be as simple as, and you can attest to this, is a person living with their parents in their basement who loves technology and builds network
Yeah.
computers out of old computers from someone else, right? Now, typically, you wouldn't even look for that kind of
Mm-hmm.
information. But when you're looking for someone to be a technologist in your company, well, wouldn't that be a good idea
Right.
to find someone who, like, putting computers together, that's their reputation in their family, that would work,
Right.
right? Or, or how about hiring someone that's been at Whole Foods for 5 years, and, for some strange reason, why did they stay there? And so a normal dogmatic approach is, oh, those people, we don't want them. Look, they live with their parents, or they don't have this or that. But if you look at what were they doing during that time with their spare time,
Mm-hmm.
what are they going to do anyway, whether you tell them to do it? That's what we want to look for,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it can be that simple, right? That's one tool that, if you just open your mind to that, my client that I mentioned that hired the GM that they really took
Mm-hmm.
off, he was working in a wholesale, how do I say this so it doesn't get back, wedding dress company.
Mm.
And what they did is they bought wedding dresses and designed them. Now, he had a project engineering company.
That's crazy.
Now, but when we talked to him, remember going back to the interview process, right? We asked him, like, hey, tell me about your past. And so, but what we didn't know, he had all these other things wonderfully that he did. And he just made a bad choice to be at a company. And we won't go through specifics, but he became the pivotal point in the core three that gave the time and energy to the owner to keep building, because we now had a person that could do that, going back to your question. So that's what I would do simply, is begin to look for not the static data points in resumes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have MBA, I have electrical engineering degree from whatever school. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. But what you want to look, what did it take for them to get there? Did they have to work a job at night
Right.
and pay for their own education?
Right.
Right? What are they doing with their spare time, and identify the patterns there. And so it turned out this guy with the wedding dress company, he worked for a very difficult owner. So that caught my attention. I said, well, hey, tell me about that. What was that like? But his mindset wasn't like, I didn't like the person. I think that he just said, you know what? I tried it for a number of years. Clue, he didn't quit right away. And then he said, I just couldn't like really identify with their style of doing business. So I said, check mark, point, plus.
Yeah.
Move him to the short list, right?
Yeah.
You see how that starts to build. So that would be one simple way to do it. That's before hire. One simple way after hire is simple now. Stop trying to fix people. Just give it up. Don't try anymore. Figure out why are they doing what they're doing, and can I eliminate those obstacles? Another true story. In an engineering company, they have what they call CAD designers. And this one gentleman just came in late for work, and he couldn't be there by the normal time. And they threatened, they cajoled, they did everything to try, like, hey, just come in. Couldn't do it. So finally, we had a cup of coffee, and I said, like, hey, what? Like, what's getting in your way? Like, what's going on? He goes, I have a bad roommate situation, and it's really getting me down, and it tires me up, and they stay up late at night, and I have to go into work. So I said, okay, how can we help to reconfigure that? So you see, I didn't try to fix him and say, hey, you're wrong. If you're going to get fired, what I try to do is understand the environment, remove obstacles. By the way, that's the easiest way to help people do more of what you want them to do, is don't fix them, remove obstacles that are getting in their way. That you can. That's within your control.
Okay. So just on that one, what did they end up doing? Like, what did you offer what kind of obstacle did you help to remove? Did you offer to say, can we get you your own apartment or?
No. We said, okay. So basically we said this is, if you can't get good rest because he's a single guy and his roommates were having a good time or whatever, we said, well, how about if we just give you a later starting time?
There you go.
Right. And now, what time would you need in order to come in at that time? So that's what we did. We gave him a later starting time, which is, by the way, the company never did that before. See, that goes back to the brain over the bucks. It's like, no, if I do that, then everybody else is going to ask, and it's going to be a big mess. Right. So we took a chance. And so here's what happened, and it's happening. I don't know if you're ever aware of like what's called habit jumping. You start one good habit, then it leads to another good one. Well, he was on time. That was the good thing, right? So, and he got his work done. And then he sort of liked it. And we started inviting him to what we call supervisor meetings, which is another thing we created just to recognize and talk about, hey, how's it being supervising your small team? And what he did, he had joined the company as a solo person in that role because the company grew. There was now 4 people in that group, and he was the supervisor. Well, guess what? He never learned how to supervise. So we started a supervisor meeting. It's like, hey, what are your questions? What are your struggles? And so what happened, then he started interacting better with the rest of the team. So you can see like one good habit can leap to another, but we're just kind of always going back to the basics of what we've been talking about all along, right? Is like, if we tried to fix him, we would say, any number of things, but we try to work with him and understand that and then make accommodations for it. And it works. And that's just not me. That's science and evidence-based, by the way. It's not Zeke Lopez's like wisdom there at all. It's just, I don't know if anybody knows Daniel Kahneman in your audience, like, slow and fast thinking. There were some interviews that he's conducted since then. And basically they asked him, like, he's a Nobel Prize winner, right? And he's a behavioral economics scientist. And so he said, yeah, there's one way to make it work. Well, I jumped all over that when I read that. I said, oh my gosh, let's try this out. And we did, right? So that would just be one thing. That's what happened with that employee. And there's sometimes it doesn't work out. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you work with people and you try to remove obstacles and it doesn't work out. Most times you're going to find out those things are beyond your influence and control, right? So don't beat yourself up. Don't think you did something wrong. The company's not a good place. It's totally beyond your influence and control, right? So I love your expression. I'm going to use that, by the way. The pain line idea. There are certain places where you just draw a line. And so the way I call them, it's beyond your control and influence. Right. And I won't bore you with all the strange stories that I've
No, those are the
gathered
best
over the
sometimes.
years. But yeah, but that's a really powerful idea. Just know that the pain line's there. Know that you can push through it. And here's the key, as long as you can influence and control it. If you can't, then you know what? It's probably better to let them live that way somewhere else and work happily someplace else.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get back to your example. You did something that seems incredibly simple, which is what we usually skip, which is had a conversation with the person that was coming in late instead of just, giving him a tick mark on his file for, coming in late or,
Oh yeah.
all those sort of normal ways. How do you, what are your recommendations for this seems reasonable versus this seems unreasonable for the business or the rest of the folks? Because I think a lot of us will go, well, if I let one of my engineers, let's say, come in later, then like, what if they all want to come in and I need to service, clients starting at 8, not starting at 10 or 11. So obviously one probably won't change that, but even if half the group decides to do that. So obviously I think making that individual decision is based on the individual, but in broad, I guess in a broader one, how do you determine if that seems like you have something within your sphere of influence that could help them? Is it, just about anything? Do it, give it a try. How do you understand where that line is?
Yeah, no, wonderful, wonderful question, right? So in that situation that I brought up, they had attempted to talk the person to a better place, right? Like, hey, you know what? That's not good for you to come in late. You're not going to get your work done. It gives you a bad reputation. How can you, that's the logical road,
Sure.
right? Okay, so the path and again, because I've worked with the client a long time and I know the employees, they said, Zeke, can you talk to him? And so I didn't take that path, and now my client doesn't take that path, right? And so the answer to your question is like, by the way, one person, all it takes is to impact the other 4 on the team to say, I want to do that too. So we thought about that ahead of time. It's a good question. So here's what we said. We said, okay, we made some requirements and conditions.
Okay.
As long as you perform according to a standard that we both agree to, then yeah, this is the way it'll be, right? So that's the beauty of it is, remember I said it was a performance culture at that particular client. We're willing to accommodate and work with you if you work with us, right? And it's a mutual working together. And so just imagine, so the worst thing could be 4 to 5 people who are all performing well, but in their own unique ways. Well, what's wrong with that?
Right.
So the argument could be, well, I can't replicate that.
Right.
Well, yes, you could. If you understood it and you said, okay, how can I begin to more stabilize that, right? So that was what we did. We put a condition on it. We said, because it's definitely a performance culture throughout the entire company, and it's based on that mutual understanding of, you know what, we now do lots of things to create that connection with each other. Like, there's no mystery around you want to make more money, you want more responsibility. Well, how are you going to do that in a business? Like, make sure the clients value that, make sure the business earns more money, and you contribute, but you get recognized. That's the whole theory, right? It's like, no, by the way, that's not Nobel Prize winning idea, right? It's just actually doing it. Because we had other challenges in the company, like some of our new hires was, hey, can I wear headphones and play music while I work? Because sometimes they work better, right? The background noise lets them focus better. Well, the first answer from the owner was, no, we're not going to do that. I don't do that. Why should they do that? And so, but eventually we started working towards, okay, how do we allow people to do that, right? Well, they're not going to hear the phone ring. How do they know someone else doesn't need them, right? So we started working on that. So I guess it all stems back to what you said, like what could happen, what may happen. And we did it. That's why I say small
Mm-hmm.
steps and always required to be a condition so all the parties win.
I love it. I love it. I love it how it's like we just said, all the parties win, right? Because so much of this is how do I, as an employer, just kind of get what I need and get in and get out. And I think a lot of hiring sometimes just give me a job description so I can get some candidates and pick one of the three and then get back to business. And I'm not saying they're bad, but it just kind of is a get in, get out. And it's not, I would say, designed from the beginning for everybody to get what they want.
Oh, here's a great one. Now you're talking about it is, so let's say everybody does what we talk about and and it works, right? Well, here's a scenario I never expected. So bad on me, something I learned and we had to innovate. Here it is. We had a breakout year. Company reached revenue never seen before. We paid out huge bonuses. I mean, really bonuses that, you go home to your family and say, look at this. They say, yeah, right on. It's great. What can we do, right? But here's what we found out. The following year, the company leveled off. So guess what? We couldn't pay those bonuses because the company had a flat year. And what do you think happened? People started saying, well, what happened to my bonus? I did a great job. I performed. Right. And I earned this much. Right. So I never expected that, to be frank, right? So, I make mistakes.
Yeah.
And so we had to put our heads together and figure out, like, okay, what do we do now? And so here's where a couple things worked in our favor. The compensation processes we design are totally transparent, meaning when we determine compensation, we just don't give you a number and say, be warm and well fed. No, we say, here's our research. Here's what we found out. You go find out what you think you're worth. We compare notes, right? Mutual win, right? Yeah. So in this case, we came up with the idea, okay. And so we met with the team. We had separate meetings because the company was a little larger then. And we discussed this because it was important to everybody, right? My bonus for next year and wasn't as much as last year. So then we came up with the idea, said, okay, so do you understand the concept? We had a record year last year and you were rewarded for that. And this year was flat because now we have to grow to the next level. Typically when you grow to mid-sized companies now, you're no longer small, up to 50 to 100. Now you're mid-size, right? And that creates its own unique complexities. But what we did there is we said, okay, as we have great years, what we're going to do is set aside money from the great years in a fund. So you'll pay less of a bonus for that year. But when we have a flat year, it'll give you a steady increase over time. Now, who does that? Right? Who does that as an employee? Right. Who does it as an owner? But it came as a result of a discussion, right? So it wasn't necessarily the employees were wrong. It's human nature, right? I made this much last year. I want to make even more next year. But the innovation was going back to, first principles and saying, okay, here's our first one or two principles. How do we maintain that? And so if we keep having great years, well, guess what? The owner, you can decide to pay it out sooner.
Nice.
If you have a flat year, guess what? You can put more out of the fund. So it was like so simple, but yet it was non-dogmatic. It wasn't the conventional way to think about it. But what we also believe is we dare you to go out and find a better place to work than here. Right. That's really what we're saying. And so for me, that gives me a great source of pride and confidence because I'm walking the walk here, man. You know what I mean? I'm not just espousing stuff and hope it works. I'm walking with you and you're walking with me. So this is awesome.
You're getting in the game. It sounds like if you're getting in the game, you're gonna get dirty. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna get hit.
That's me to a nutshell. You know what? The guy that does dirty jobs and he gets in there and he's like got muck all over him and it smells. That's kind of a mark for me that you're really in it to win it. Not when it's all great and it's all fun. You're in it to win it. Going back, I'm going to use your idea, the pain line. When you hit that pain line, it's like, okay, man, I'm going to bear down. I'm going to get dirty and muddy, but I'm going to keep to my principles and I'm going to push through this. So that's just my bias. by the way. That's my bias, right?
Yeah, no,
So,
I love it. No, no, and I guess what I've learned about that from others. This pain line is that's where you have to adapt. You have to put in those core people
yeah,
because you
yeah.
won't
Great.
you won't grow past the pain line until you do something different. You have to change your
Good,
mindset.
good.
And so
Wow.
for too long, I've hit the pain line and just bounced off of it. And I feel like if anybody is as crazy as me, it's like if you just floor it in a manual transmission or something, like you're just gonna bounce right off of the rev limiter over and over, and that's not gonna go any faster.
I love that. I love that story. Yeah. Flooring it in neutral.
Exactly.
Well, I get.
Yeah, you're not going any faster. So you've got to figure out how to. That's been my experience. I've always had to figure out why am I doing this? Why am I still banging my head against this? And figure out how to change my mindset, surround myself with the right people. Um, Speaking of which, so how do you help people, Zeke? How do you help business owners see people as an asset? What do you do specifically? Because now that people have listened to this and heard this, I want to have a better understanding of how you help people.
Keeping in mind that I focus solely on small businesses, right? So I'm not necessarily banging on the door or looking for these long consulting engagements where they depend on me for everything. The first thing I do is I kind of call it the 90 minutes where it costs a fixed amount of money, and I ask them for information to send it to me. I have them take a set of assessments, and in that 90 minutes, what we try to address is go back to first principles, like your mindset relative to people. But I want to use evidence in your story because, as you can see through our entire conversation today, it kind of has its roots in everything. It's not just one idea. So that's the first thing I do, and then I offer them part of that is like 3 to 4 weeks of follow-up, right? So we're on the phone for 90 minutes. I did some work before that with them, gathering information. And then afterwards, we follow up, typically via email, because I try to match the owner's schedule, because they can't say, hey, I'm going to give you a day, right? So that's one way we do it. And typically what we're trying to do there is just get the mindset and come up with 1 or 2 basics. And I also look at the financials of the company and where they are profit margin wise, where they are marketing wise. Remember the core 3, right? So I have to focus on the core 3 because it's all got to work in order to make money to do all this, right? So they give me information on that, and that's kind of step 1. So that actually what they're doing is they have the right mindset, and it answers the 3 big questions, right? Is that me? Do I want to do that? How do I make money at this? And how do I deliver on the promises that I've made to my people? That's the first step. And I keep it simple. Typically, what that leads to is they say, okay, this works, right? I like this. Then we either try to find the people that are missing together, right? And that's another project if they want to do that. Or otherwise, what we do is they may want a little bit more if they're in an emergency stage, right? Where, that pain line is like right front and center. And they, and what the pain lines look like there is typically sales is not working for them. And they think they have to let go of salespeople in the team. They don't know what to do, right? So in that sense, we use that first step as sources of information. And then we try to focus on what impact point with the people could we use to free that up. So an example would be, for one of my clients, you had to sell his way. And his way of selling was sell the project, serve the project, collect the money on the project, and then prospect all at the same time.
Wow.
And he believed in that. And that was just his rule. And then through that second step process, I said, you know what? That's not going to work. We're not going to find people that want to sell, deliver on the promise, collect the bill, and prospect. And guess what? Their income's going to go like this and like this and like this. Because when they're here, it's because they're collecting and delivering on the promises. So we said, how about if we eliminate 2 steps out of that and just focus on someone who can sell and give them a distinctive way and a better sales pitch, just so they can get in front of the right people and know what to say and how to conduct themselves. And let's give the accounting and to somebody else. Well, lo and behold, that worked. Like, I'm not saying that it's not magic. It's just kind of reviewing what's there. So that's kind of the second. And then this is only for larger companies. They kind of make me part of their leadership team to represent the voice, right? So now they're probably upwards, I don't go any higher than a few hundred people, but now they need someone on the team who can talk business speak and people speak together because they don't respect HR people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They just don't think they've ever been an entrepreneur, or they don't understand financials, whatever their origin beliefs are, right? So my job is to build a bridge there and really hold them accountable to what they told me with their team, right? So that's kind of the third phase. And ultimately, once they've gone through that, they can kind of do this on their own and just come back to use some of my tools if they, on an ongoing basis, but then just come back for refreshers. That's it if they need it. So, or a big problem that they don't want to tackle on their own. But I try to help them find their way to make it repeatable their way and not have to rely on me because, people don't want to, do that. They want to find ways to do it themselves. So great.
Yeah. So it sounds like you teach people how to get rid of you once you've taught them, right? You work yourself out of a job. And
well, yeah, I mean, I actually did that when I was building businesses myself. Yeah. That was weird. That was one of my weird things. I had two investor financed businesses, and one, I put a business plan together as part of the hiring process. And I said, and he goes well, what's this over here? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, that's me training someone else and getting out. And he said, well, what do you mean? Why do you want to do that? Because I love building things. That's what I love to do. But I really don't like status quo very much. It gets very, I blame myself. If things aren't growing, I get really weird. It's like, okay, what did I do wrong? But I do like building things and training someone that loves the day-to-day kind of maintenance and blocking and tackling. I respect it, but I'm just not that good at it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. So if you're listening, I've had the pleasure of working directly with Zeke, and I would say if you want the perspective of an entrepreneur, that's been super helpful in my experience because it's not just a pie in the sky HR person that, like you said, maybe I think couldn't relate, but can very much relate. So in my personal experience, you've been really helpful understanding it within the context of the business, not just I need to hire, but why I need to hire, what the timing is, and why, helping us figure out what makes us unique even. So that's been tremendous. Thank you for that, Zeke. And if you're listening, don't miss out to take that opportunity to work with Zeke. I want to ask you one other thing, and I want to highlight this because I think that this is important. Not only can he help you in working with you directly and understanding your business, but you have everybody's familiar. I say everybody. People are familiar with different assessments, whether they're StrengthsFinder or DISC or whatever it is, and you may be using something in your hiring process, and you've come up with your own assessments, right? So, if I don't know what you can say, but I know that you do a lot of them, and there's some interesting things that I found from using them. So I don't know if there's anything you can say publicly about the number or those sort of things, but you're not an individual just with an entrepreneur background, and that understands people. But this is where I call you the mad scientist, because you got this data brain and this huge assessment, and you can see patterns and things that help you understand how to make hires that I have found super valuable. So tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm a stubborn guy and I don't like losing is what it is. And so, I was just very lucky to earlier, in my career, just have the opportunity to build businesses. Right. And I didn't always win in my job. Right. So sometimes it was to create 12 offices with venture money. Sometimes it was just to turn around a business. And so what I realized was I was the problem, and one day I'll just, so not to really get it. One of my employees came up to me and said, I hate working for you.
Oh, wow.
And she was my assistant. Wow. I was in the software business then. And but I knew her, and we were really strong friends. We went to the same church, So I said, what did I do? And, I'm not a screamer by nature. Here's what I found out, which what I learned. I had been traveling around the world. You could buy one-way tickets and hit 7 cities. And she said, you're never with your family. You're always working. And by your own example, you expect people to work like you.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, I was devastated. It's that's the guy I didn't want to be, but I was him. So I hired some consultants to help me, and they used assessment tools. So the first group of consultants didn't work. Second group of consultants didn't work. And so finally, but the second group, I made friends with them, and they took me to a group of PhDs that actually design and create assessments. And they've explained the assessment industry to me. And I said, oh my gosh, no wonder this is not working. So what happened then is, again, remember stubborn guy who doesn't give up easily, right? Wants to win. I decided I'm going to learn statistics. I'm going to learn why these things don't work, and wound up just being really lucky. I bumped into the right people. The assessments I were using, I found mistakes in them. I contacted the assessment company and told them how to fix their mistakes. They hired me to do their IP. And now, and not because of me at all, but now they sell every month about 500,000 of those around the world, right? And so that's really made me what I am, is I realized that for me, the business part was easy to understand. The people's part, for the life of me, was the most frustrating, irrational, hard, but I took it personally. It's like, oh, Zeke, you're a failure. You're not doing the job. And I learned through all the trials and tribulations, and I looked at the psychology, I looked at the statistics, I looked at other assessments. And what I learned from all that, again, wasn't like intentional. It was like pure gravitas. I just said, I'm not going to let this beat me. That's how I kind of became the quirky guy that I am today. And so, I believe in assessment tools, but what I want to tell those folks, there's a variety of tools out there in the marketplace, right? Always remember 2 things when it comes to assessment tools. It's just a model of a person, but not really the person. But can it be good enough to give you an advantage to start from there, right? Not to put people in a box, right? Because one of my assessments measures unconventionality, as you know, right? I like your word better, unicorns, right? It's those people that don't fit the dogmatic ways of finding people, but wow, they can make a big impact in a business, but you have to understand that they even exist first, right? So that's how, all that history has helped me. So I would say if you're using other assessments, chances are, as long as you understand what they do and what they don't do, they're not a magic black box for predicting success, but they're useful. As long as you know how to do that, then that's, a step in the right direction. However, one thing I've discovered to my happiness is that I started with the unconventional side of things first. Because I'm a quirky, unconventional rule bender myself, right? Remember I told you a story about this person saying, I hate you, right? It's like, that's pretty strong words in my book, right? But that's where I started from. So I wanted to understand, like, on all the business, the bucks side of the ledger, I was like, hey, we were growing the business. We're hiring new people. We're opening offices in Australia and China. So I was traveling all over. But on the brain side, it's like, ooh, man, what was I missing? So I guess, my business is really about that journey and helping people not do the stupid stuff that I did, to get through all that. And maybe I can make it a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, can I help people feel like, oh, this is what I'm really good at? Man, I'm not good at this. So let me focus on this and help me create a way that I can replicate this for every person that I hire. Because you work too hard to do anything otherwise. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I love that. So my in working with you, and also just kind of summarizing, right? If you don't want to make all the same mistakes, and if you don't want to have traveled around the entire world and have assessments of 6 million people a year, you could work with Zeke. And my point is, one thing we agree on, and I believe very much, is assessment is just a model. It doesn't tell you everything. You shouldn't necessarily include or exclude based on that. But it does give you more information. It does allow you to ask perhaps better questions. And then yours is something I haven't found in your Colby and your disc and your Strength Finder, where you can find this what I call unicorn, and then you can ask more about
Yeah.
it, because and my belief is people have things that make them unique in their strengths, and we don't play to them enough. We play to the fix your weaknesses. So I love that. I love what you've been able to do. And just at the end, I guess it helps me reframe what I believe, which is you're one who away from changing your life. So find one of those
Mm.
people and change your mindset, change your life. Zeke,
Hey, sign me up for that. I'm in.
exactly. How do people get connected to you if they're interested? How do they follow? How do they reach out? What do you
Yeah.
recommend?
So totally appreciate you offering that. Um, I'm almost finished rebranding the company, because for a long time I used People Oxygen, just thinking, oh, giving oxygen to people gives them more energy. And then I realized, like, almost all business owners have the same complaint.
Mm.
And that is, I have people
Mm-hmm.
problems, right? Just like I did.
Yep.
So I rebranded the company as everyonehatespeopleproblems.com.
Okay.
And so that's where you'd want to go to kind of just, reach out or just contact or have a conversation, right? And it'll list, what we do, how we do it, why we do it, how long we've been doing it. But I think I just wanted to like capture that emotion of people problems were like dragging me down like I had. So that's the best way to reach me. And I'm a pretty open guy. We can have a conversation. So because basically one of the messages in our website now is we're not looking for the perfect business owner. Just bring all your messiness to us and we'll work through it, right? It's
I love
like,
that.
just like I did for myself, except I had to do it solo because I didn't know where else to go for help,
Yeah.
right? So that's kind of the message, and what we're trying to do is kind of non-dogmatic ways to help people break through your pain line. Thank you. To get to the other side, right? So that's
I
it.
love that. And so rumor is you have a podcast. How can we find that?
Yeah, I had to work up enough courage to think that might be valuable to people. We still have to find out, but you can go on the website, and it's you'll be able to click on it and get references to it. And I plan just to start publishing more free information and doing like really breakdowns, like a lot of things we talked about today. Like, here's my situation, how do I go through it, right? Here's a candidate, how do I, so people get the practical, concrete side of this, and not just kind of good theory or, what very general. I'm more of a deep dive person than I am like, hey, people are your most valuable assets. Like, okay, yeah, thanks. Tell me what to do.
That's right.
And tell me how it's going to work for me, right? So, yeah.
Well, I love this. Thank you for being on MSP Mindset today, Zeke. This has been amazing. And in my view, guys, there's two issues and there's two funnels. We all have a sales and marketing funnel that we spend so much time and effort on, and we forget about the talent funnel. And so if you're not working on the talent funnel, you're going to hit that pain line. You're not going to have the right people. So reach out to Zeke, reach out to his company, and engage him and see if he can help you with that. Zeke, thank you so much for being here today. It was my
Thanks
gift.
to you, Damien. It's been a pleasure, and enjoy.
Thanks.